believe we have a quorum of 6. Then we need to go ahead and...
Studio, we ready to go
Studio.
live?
All right. I want to call the December 11th council meeting to order. Let's go ahead and begin with our introductions, and we'll start with Ms. Watlington.
Victoria Watlington, at large.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Dante Anderson, Mayor Pro Tem, District 1.
Good evening, Luana Mayfield, Councilmember at Large.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Tijuana Brown, District 3.
Billy Tons, Deputy City Clerk.
All right, thank you, everyone. Today, I believe that we are going to, we're all recognizing that we have a number of important items. First, we have a public forum, and you should understand we have exceeded the number of people that we would have so that people will have 2 minutes to speak. And also, we are going to, I hope, be very respectful, and I will ask the audience to be respectful as remarks are being made. This is a continuation of our last meeting that we had for the public forum as well. So divergent views, but respected views are what we would have as we do this. In addition, we're all aware, I hope, that we will be watching the video that took place on Arrowwood this evening afterwards. So as we go through this agenda and prepare for that, I hope that everyone is ready to follow enough so that we can also, again, look at that in the view that we are required to do and hear from the chief as an end of that. So today, right now, we're in our consent items list. So I'm going to ask Ms. Harris if there were any questions regarding our consent agenda, if you would review those, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Good evening. And Ms. Mayfield, I had a chance to speak with you earlier, but I don't know if you had any additional ones or if anybody else had any additional consent item questions.
All right, so without any further questions, I'm going to ask if there is a consent agenda item for a separate vote. I do have items, let me just start off with a regular motion. May I have a motion to approve consent items 15 through 43, and with the exception of items 36, 37, 39, and 40, which have been deferred by staff and are expected to come back in January's meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second, and so any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'm sorry, Madam, we have discussion. We have Mr. Graham.
Just a brief comment. Again, I know we're going to talk about infrastructure earlier today, but there's so many infrastructure projects that we approve in the consent. I just wanted to bring that to the public's attention, that there's a lot of stuff that we're doing this week, as we do every month, related to infrastructure that's kind of buried in the consent items, and so it's just another nod to the public that we are addressing the issue.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mayfield?
Mayor, will you repeat the consent items that are being pulled again, 36, 37?
39 and 40.
Thank you.
All right. All right, any further discussion on our consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please raise your hands. I believe that is unanimous. And so we will now go to our action review agenda oversight. So with the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We have 2 items on the action review tonight. And as we go back to one of my 30-day memos, we talked about rounding out the year, being able to have a infrastructure update, and that will be kicked off with Liz Babson, as well as an Eastland update, which will be kicked off with Tracy Dotson. So there's been a lot of things that we've been discussing about infrastructure. I'll let you know that tonight's not the end. We'll continue to have discussions during the annual strategy meeting, as well as in the spring. And I will remind you that as we started to talk about all of the projects that we're addressing throughout the city, we had Ed McKinney and the team come up and really do something that had not been done before in the city of Charlotte, and let's look at a series of projects from sidewalks to roads to greenways, bike paths, and some rail infrastructure and begin bundling those projects. And so that'll be something that we discuss in the spring. But again, I didn't want anyone to think this is the end of our infrastructure discussion. It's just an update that we committed to you by the end of the fourth quarter of this year. So Mayor, if there aren't any questions, I'd like to turn it over to Liz.
Ms. Babson.
Thank you, and good evening. Again, I'm Liz Babson. I'm an Assistant City Manager with the City of Charlotte, and I'm joined by others. I'm joined by staff from CMS, the Charlotte Fire Department, and Charlotte Water to highlight 3 infrastructure focus areas this evening. While, as the manager indicated, we're only talking about 3 focus areas tonight, I'd like to make a note that this work occurs in many other areas across the organization in partnership with partners like the county and CMS, and it's part of the efforts that we do to prepare for growth and development in the city. So again, as Mr. Jones indicated, you'll remember we had a special infrastructure meeting last December, and we discussed infrastructure capacity across the city as growth and development occurs. As this image conveys, infrastructure is made up of many different components, and it's an important part of how we plan for our future and build this city. When we talk about infrastructure, it's also important to understand that our strategy for growth and building infrastructure capacity is multi-layered, and it occurs in many different ways, as you'll hear tonight with the 3 areas of focus that we've brought for you to hear about. And Council, you continue to take important steps in that space and adopting policies that support aligning our growth and building that infrastructure capacity. To name a couple of examples, just 2 years ago, you adopted the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and in that plan, we established a long-term vision for how we will grow that aligns with our land use policies and infrastructure planning so that we can continue to improve the work that we do in allowing us to create jobs and housing and create mobility opportunities for how people travel between those. In addition, it didn't just stop with the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, but we continue to develop more detailed plans that help us in that space as well, like the Strategic Mobility Plan, the Strategic Energy Action Plan. You'll hear even next year about the Tree Canopy Action Plan, just to name a few. And then last year, Council, you adopted the Unified Development Ordinance, which sets the regulatory requirements for how we develop. And in that document, we did important work to continue to improve the measures that we have in place to build out this infrastructure capacity as we experience growth and development in the city. And just to name a couple of examples, we lowered thresholds for stormwater mitigations, and we updated multimodal transportation requirements for development projects. And we're not done. We're just in the first 6 months of implementation of that Unified Development Ordinance, so we anticipate being able to see even more success in that area. And the impact of growth, as Mr. Jones mentioned, is also influencing a new way that we look at our capital spending for mobility projects. You've had a couple of presentations over this last year by Ed McKinney, and we've highlighted a new approach to bundling those projects so we can leverage our investment and improve mobility in areas that have the greatest need. And so following that infrastructure meeting and several discussions afterward, you received a memo in May that outlined a multi-phased approach with an emphasis on making improvements quickly and focusing on the infrastructure areas where we heard concerns from you. So the first phase focused on improvements to the information provided through rezonings. You see continued growth and development and are approving rezonings every month. And so we knew that it was important to continue to provide you more information to help you as you make those decisions. We implemented the Development Near Me website and launched that this summer, which provides an interactive map with real-time information about land development activity. We've gotten great feedback from several of you who have used that website and that tool, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback from residents as well who are excited to be able to see that information real time. And we're continuing to make improvements in the information that we provide you monthly in the staff analysis on rezonings to make sure that we're giving you that more comprehensive information that you're looking for. The second phase focuses on 5 infrastructure-focused areas. And again, tonight, you'll hear about 3 of those, which are CMS, Fire, and Charlotte Water. And then we'll plan to bring back the next 2 remaining areas, which are stormwater and transportation, after the first of the year. The third phase is forthcoming in 2024 and will serve as a piece that really starts to tie all of this information together in a tool where you can see real-time data about the improvements that are being made and how the vision for the growth in our city is being leveraged by the work that's already developed through the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Implementation Dashboard. That dashboard already exists. It measures our progress toward implementing the 2040 Comprehensive Plan goals that you adopted. And we propose to continue the work of evaluating infrastructure capacity and add that information to this tool to allow us to gain an even deeper understanding of that relationship. And so before I turn it over to the other presenters and they go into a whole lot more detail, I wanted to share this focus area summary because it's a good way to understand the point that I have described in some of the opening remarks. This table is an indication of just how complex this work is, and it demonstrates how each focus area is uniquely different. It also shows many of the metrics and standards that are established by the regulatory agencies that have authority over those infrastructure areas. And our work is to take those standards and apply them to local conditions. This, for example, with the fire department, they clearly have defined metrics by external agencies that affect their accreditation rating. And so it's important that they create measurements to respond to those conditions. Our city strategies to ensuring that compliance aren't limited to just the physical infrastructure like new infill fire stations, but operational adjustments that we can also make in order to meet that compliance. So, for example, the Charlotte Fire Department added a ladder company to Station 39 in the current budget. The addition of that new company at an existing station helps achieve those external metrics without needing to construct a new fire station. So again, just an example to show you the complexity of this infrastructure focused areas and some of the ways in which we can take standards that are set by others and make and adapt them to local conditions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Lacaria from CMS to come up and talk about CMS school planning and how that relationship between school utilization and capacity plans for their future needs.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. Again, I'm Dennis Lacaria. I'm the Executive Director of Facilities Planning and Real Estate for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. And just to give a little overview of where CMS is today, we are the 17th largest school district in the United States out of 13,000. So you hear 17th largest, but I think the context is pretty important. We're an incredibly diverse school system, representing folks from 175 different countries and 204 languages being spoken inside of our schools each and every day. When we do planning at schools, it's very different from the sort of planning that happens for other sorts of infrastructure, but it's all grounded in the same sort of thing. We have assumptions. We have to assume certain things, like we have to assume that the state is still going to fund us at the levels at which they've been funding us. We have methodologies that we use in order to make sure that we're calculating our things appropriately, and we have standards that we take into consideration around what we build and how we build them. And so all of these factors have an external component and an internal component, because just like with the City Council, the Board of Education does have the ability to make decisions that change how schools operate. So some things get done to us and other things get done to us by ourselves. One of the other ways to look at the differences between municipal planning and school planning is to look through the inputs and the way that we're informing our decisions. So, you know, from a school standpoint, when we're talking about actually building for school capacity, we actually have to look at how many students we have on the ground today, how many students we're anticipating, a methodology called cohort survival. So we actually evaluate year over year, grade by grade, what our students do as they progress through the system. There's some some interesting anomalies. If you look at the 8th grade to 9th grade transition, typically our high school classes are about 125% or 130% even of our 8th grade classes, because we tend to get back a lot of kids from private schools, charter schools, and other places at the high school level, because our high schools offer things that they can't get somewhere else. We also have to take into consideration boundaries, because we're a neighborhood school-driven district, and so there's a pupil assignment plan, and the way that we assign students actually has, direct correlation to how those schools operate. We're looking at our schools and our geographies very discreetly. We know that certain housing typologies behave differently in one part of the city versus another part of the city. So all of those factors get taken into consideration, and ultimately, we look to how those projections tie to our actual and projected needs, both from an operating standpoint and from a capital standpoint. When we're talking in terms of rezonings, for example, we're looking, and also the way we plan for school capacity, we're actually looking first and foremost at utilization. And so that's not a measure of how many students are in a school or how many students could be in a school, but it's actually looking at how many teachers we have, classroom teachers, versus how many spaces for them to teach we have. And there are different things that constitute a classroom teacher at different levels. For example, an English language learner teacher at the elementary level is performing his or her work in a push-in or pull-out sort of environment. They're not designated as a classroom teacher, but at the middle school and the high school level, they actually do receive a classroom. So those allotments get taken into consideration. At the elementary school, it's very simple. Teachers with the kid all periods of the day, unless they're at a special, they're at art, they're at music, or they're at lunch. So those classrooms are fully occupied, whereas at our middle and high schools, we actually float. So we have a teacher has a 4-block day. They teach 3 periods of that day. So that period that they're not teaching, we have them leave the classroom and another teacher and class floats in to give us additional capacity. So when you see the utilization, 100% at an elementary school means it's full. There's a teacher in every classroom, every period. 130% at the middle and the high schools. And so those are some of the metrics that come back to council for consideration in the rezonings, and that's something that can be a little bit confusing, just because of the fact that we're saying 130% is okay at the middle or high school level. The school is actually functioning as designed. Looking ahead, we do a lot of work together with city staff, whether that's CDOT. I have standing meetings with city planners. We are working on getting all of the current and future schools into the Development Near Me app, which we think is a great opportunity to push more information about schools out to the community. We are in ongoing conversations about the way that we respond to rezonings, especially in light of the changes tied to the UDO. And also, as everyone I hope is well aware, we did have a $2.5 billion bond pass here. And so thank you very much for your support. I know that members of council were instrumental in that, and we appreciate the support of this body and the community at large in ensuring that we have the resources that we need, because unlike city council or county commission, boards of education in the state of North Carolina don't have funding authority. So there's no ability for us to levy fees or taxes for our operation. And the state hasn't done a bond since 1996. And just to clear this up, we get $12 million a year from the North Carolina Education Lottery. And it's about $50 million to build one school. So we have to go through a bond, and we have to get that public support in order to be able to do what we need to do. And so there are 30 projects impacting 35 schools throughout the county, not just in the city, but throughout the county. And this information is available on the CMS website. We also have a website called cmsbondconstruction.com, where the projects that are actually underway can be viewed. There's live cameras on the sites where there's active construction, but all the information about the 2017 bond projects, as well as the 2023 bond projects that are just kicking off, will be able to be found there as well.
I want to ask, Liz, did you decide, do you want to have questions now, or do we come back after all of the presentations? How did you plan it?
We can do whatever the mayor and the council want to do,
Well, that's
but
true, but that might not be the best thing to do.
logistically, we've got it set up with these guys with a microphone, so it would be easier for us if you hold questions to the end.
So jot down your questions, and we'll go through all of the speakers and come back, and we'll start with schools and go down that way. All right, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Scaris, and I am one of the Chief Johnson's deputy chiefs. On the slide that you see is just an overview of what our department currently is. Numbers that are, to us, that are really important to it is obviously 270 firefighters that we have on duty every day, and that is our minimum staffing. 132, just over 132,000, almost 133,000 total incidents for last fiscal year, 2023. And then the 6-minute total response times in the bottom right. That is what we judge everything on. There are a number of factors that play into that, which is our dispatchers and telecommunicators have 60 seconds to answer the phone, obtain an address, and dispatch a company. The company, when they're in the station, has 60 seconds to get alerted, get to the apparatus, if it gets dressed, if it's a fire type call, or on the truck on an EMS call, and be out of the station in that 60 seconds. And then we try to base it on NFPA standards, which you heard about earlier, to make sure that we have a 4-minute response time to get to any place, anywhere in the city that we can. And that makes that total response time of 6 minutes. And then as you see on the bottom, the Center for Public Safety Excellence, we are accredited through them. We are getting ready in 2025, I believe it is, to go through our 4th reaccreditation. And then the Insurance Service Organization Class 1, that's what sets the insurance rates for commercial and residential property in the city. And we are less than 1% of U.S. departments have both of those statuses, and we are one of them. So our infrastructure capacity safeguards. Total response time, as we said earlier, is really an important metrics for us, because everything is how fast we can get there. 90% of the things that we go to, everybody would consider a true emergency. Medical incident, fire incident, where seconds and minutes of travel time matter. So we try to really stay within that 4 minutes of travel time for every company in the city. We have those established quality control benchmarks where we evaluate ourselves on the 90th percentile, which is a nationwide average. Currently, we are just a little bit below that, but also at the same time, you'll see on one of the other slides, there's some investments that's being made by council that has been approved to help us get closer to that 90% matrix. Our planning and strategy development section analyzes the growth that we get through cooperation, obviously, with planning and econ development, to make sure that as areas are starting to build up and growth is, Iron District is a great example, or the River District is another one, where we can provide that input and begin doing analysis on what our response times into those. For every housing unit, whether it's an apartment, a condo, or a single-family house, it equates to about 0.38 calls per housing unit. And that's what we've been able to come up with over an average over the last 10 years. And then the last piece is Center of Public Safety Excellence and ISO. We get rated every 5 years. On the Center of Public Safety Excellence side, they bring experts from outside of the department that come in and look at all the plans that we have put together, the things that we have done, what we had planned to do the last time they were in town, the progress we've made to get those, and what our goals and objectives are as we move forward, trying to continue to provide that high level of service. So determining needs, one of the big tools that we use is heat maps. So on the left, you'll see before Firehouse 43 and after Firehouse 43. One of the things we realized through our planning and development is look at where those hotspots are. So you see on the beforehand, we had a really large area that we were not meeting those response times. Again, about 5 years ago, council approved us to build Fire Station 43 on Clanton Road between South Tryon Street and 77. And you'll see in the bottom picture where the response times in that area have greatly improved. The map on the right is what we are currently looking at. So you look at Firehouse 45, which is Hidden Valley, that is under construction. Again, it is one of 5 facilities that council approved that have some level of progress into building it. 45 is being built as we speak. It is on North Tryon Street, right near Orr Road, and it's to address that one area. Firehouse 44 out in River District. Firehouse 46 on the north end, Miranda Road, is in the planning stage. That is, again, to address that hot spot up in the top where we're not meeting response times. Firehouse 11, right outside of the north side of Uptown, off 28th Street and Graham Street, is a complete tear down and rebuild. That's a station that was built in the early 60s. And honestly, it became over capacity for what we now have. That is one of our heavy rescue stations, so they have some additional equipment. And it became cost prohibitive to do a major rehabilitation to that station with the challenges that we folks. So again, one of the 5 projects that council approved funding for. And then Firehouse number 30, which is out towards Beam Road and Shopton Road, right across the street from the Fire Police Training Academy. And that will be the all-electric fire station, including the apparatus. It'll be an electric fire truck. So that is also. What you see on the map in purple are those stations where we believe through, again, research and looking at historical data, where there is the potential for new stations that need to be built. There are some other areas where if you look between stations 12 and 20, which is the Nations Ford South Boulevard corridor, that's starting to pop up a little bit where, that's a really good place for an infill station where we add, like we did for Station 39, adding an additional company to an existing facility. And again, looking ahead, what do we do? The growth metrics obviously take a large piece into that. Is where is the growth? What does that anticipated call volume look like, and how do we maintain that high level of service? We continue to update our fire facilities master plan, which looks at infill fire stations, rehabilitation to meet ADA compliance for a lot of them that were built. We do have 12 stations that are over 50 years old. So looking at how do we make sure that they can accommodate everything that we currently need. And then true up the rezoning and annexation comments. So we make sure our strategic planning division, make sure that as we know areas are coming, that we make sure we put any comments in on things that would affect the fire service for that specific area. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I'm David Zur, Deputy Director with Charlotte Water, and tonight I'm going to share with you a little bit about our community supporting infrastructure. So some quick information about our utility. We provide service, of course, to the City of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, the towns, even some areas in adjoining counties. And to do that, we have basically 2 large systems, the water system for drinking water and then the wastewater system for the sewer. And we maintain over 9,000 miles of pipe between both of those, and that provides service to 318,000 different accounts with a total population served of about 1.1 million residents. Every single day, we treat and send out, and you all drink about 116 million gallons of our water. And then on the flip side, we take back and treat and clean and discharge to the environment about 85 million gallons of wastewater. We try to maintain strong financial viability while doing that. We maintain AAA bond ratings with the bond rating agencies, but meanwhile, we balance that with affordability. And each gallon of water that our citizens use costs less than 4 cents. To do all of that, we have a lot of infrastructure out there between the 9,000 miles of pipes, the treatment plants, elevated tanks, booster pump stations, and far more than that. And it ranges in size from the very big, the wastewater and water treatment facilities, down to the local pipes that are in any individual neighborhood. And from all of that infrastructure, there are different inputs, there's different drivers for it, different ways we plan for it, and different regulatory requirements. A couple of examples on the largest scale for treatment facilities, we look to the very long-term population forecasting, master planning. We'll tie it back to the 2040 comprehensive plan. We partner with and are an active participant in the Catawba Water Management Group that looks after the Catawba River as the region's water source. As you slide down that scale, I'll go ahead and skip down to the bottom of it, but when you get to the smaller diameter pipes that are in the neighborhoods, those are often informed and driven by localized development, and that's where you all see that in front of you in the form of rezonings. On the sewer side, we have a program called the Capacity Assurance Program, and it is specific only to the sewer side. And it analyzes our sewer system for the impacts from new development. It's something that we started in 2009, so we have a number of years under our belt. And it looks at every new development that occurs within our service area. It analyzes the flow that is generated from that development, from that point of connection, and then traces it downstream through each and every pipe all the way to the treatment facility. We want to make sure that we have adequate capacity. Bad things happen if you don't. You could have sanitary sewer overflows. We don't want that. And as we analyze that, then we work with the individual applicant, the developer, to make sure that there is adequate capacity. A vast majority of the time, the answer is yes, we have that. If we don't, then we begin to work more one-on-one with the developer to figure out where there is a bottleneck or a limitation in the system and how we can solve that. And it's often through collaborative type of improvements. On the other side, on the drinking water side, this happens a little bit differently. We undertake holistic water system master planning efforts every 5 or 6 years. We just started a refresh of that program here recently. And this looks at the system as a whole, and it evaluates a number of different system performance criteria. It's looking at things like water pressure for every part of our system. It's looking at fire flows, so there's adequate firefighting protection, of course, water quality, and a host of other things. The way that is analyzed is we run it through a complex hydraulic model. It takes a long time. We analyze it in a number of different ways, but out of that, it tells us if we have any weaknesses in our system, and sometimes we do. And that could be in the shorter term, 5 years, or it could be way out in the future. And any of those needs then turn into an individual capital project. Those get rolled into our overall 5-year CIP. So next, I'm going to share with you an example of how those steps, those efforts actually come to life. And this is an example of areas that are in the northern and eastern part of the county related to sewer service. And those parts of the counties want to facilities, and we have a contracted purchased amount of capacity there. And a couple of years ago, we learned that treatment facility was nearing its permitted limits. It couldn't take any more flow, and so we had to pause accepting new development in that area for a period of time. But immediately, we went into the partnering with them on an expansion of that facility. That is underway, actually expected to be complete in 2024. And then we also endeavored to build a large sewer pump station, and it intercepts flow near the county line, and it pumps it back across the northern part of the county to our McDowell Creek wastewater treatment plant. And what that does is it gives us obviously additional capacity in that area, but it also gives us flexibility in the future in how we operate our system. That project also will be done in 2024. And then while all of this was happening, we were working with proposed developments and local developers on any individual specific development. A number of those we had to say, we want to provide that service, but you're going to need to wait until these projects are nearing completion. Some of them we were able to find alternative ways to get them sewer service. And happy to say that we were able to resume accepting and permitting that sewer capacity back in June of this year. So Charlotte Water, looking ahead, what do we do to continue this great work and ensuring that we have the right infrastructure in place at the right time? It starts with planning and a couple of notable accomplishments. We undertook and completed a focused look at the water system in the central business district. It's a grid of pipes. Some of them are old, and out of that came a host of improvements. We conducted a county-wide wastewater master plan for the sewer system. And as I mentioned earlier, we just started the refresh of the water system master plan that will take probably about another year to complete that. Out of these planning efforts, it generates capital projects. We have a whole host of them. They're in the budget that you all graciously approve for us every year. But a couple of the noteworthy ones that I just wanted to mention, we have the Stowe Regional Water Resource Recovery Facility. It's going to be our 6th wastewater treatment plant that's being built in the western part of the system, kind of close to, but not too close, to the Whitewater Center that will provide for sewer capacity for decades to come. On the eastern side, in the university area, that treatment plant, the Mallard Creek wastewater treatment plant, we're conducting an expansion of that to accommodate the growth. On the water side, a couple of important projects. We are building some very large pipelines over to the eastern part of the county. We call that the 960 pressure zone, and those will provide for that future capacity as well as redundancy out in that system. And then at our Franklin Water Treatment Plant that's out on Brookshire Boulevard, if you've ever driven by it, it's our largest of the 3 water treatment plants. And we just commenced with a large-scale project that will come in and rehabilitate and provide some upgrades at that plant. I think that brings me to the end. Liz.
Thank you. And again, as we conclude, just want to say a quick thank you to the team. I couldn't have done this without them. And these guys worked really hard to get a condensed version of their focus area to talk to you this evening. As an example, Dennis was with us a few months ago at the Transportation Planning and Development Committee, and I think we spent 30 minutes on his presentation alone. So lots more information behind all of these slides. But we thought it was important to bring forth a few focus areas and just give you a sense for what we're learning as we dig in deeper on the infrastructure conversation and talk about capacity. So again, thanks to the team and lots of other folks behind the scenes that helped us get here tonight. So next steps for you, council, is that we're going to bring back those 2 remaining infrastructure focus areas, with stormwater and transportation being those next 2. And then, council, you're approaching that time of year where you start talking about your key priorities. And so what we believe that gives us is an opportunity to hear your conversations at the start of next year and begin to align the work that we will continue to do to dig deeper into some of these infrastructure focus areas and align that with the things that continue to surface as priorities through your council discussions. And then last but certainly not least, we really want to leverage that 2040 Comprehensive Plan Implementation Dashboard. And as we start to find information and data that we can map using that tool and report out to you, we want to include that information. As a reminder, that dashboard reports out on how you're doing with your goals that were established in that comprehensive plan, and we think it's a good alignment to put information that starts to talk about infrastructure impacts in relationship to meeting those goals. So with that, we will open up for any questions.
We go ahead and start in the same order, and we'll start with the school system. I think I saw, I'm sorry.
It might be more expedient to let everyone just go once rather than go 3 times around.
You read my mind. I think if we can start and go around the room one time, and if you could be really cognizant, the county does 3 minutes. I think 3 minutes to ask questions. And if you guys would also be as succinct as possible. I know that there's a lot of information out there, but let's try to keep our answers direct and to the point. And our questions the same way. So I will go ahead and start with Ms. Watlington for schools.
No.
Pass. I know.
I won't be here.
Mr. Bakari?
I'll do all of the topics and set a good example.
Okay.
This is great. This is great. I appreciate it and appreciate all 3 of you guys and Liz up there presenting to us. This was exactly on the path of where we needed to head. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it is a huge leap from where we were to where we are now. What I would suggest is this. So we saw kind of the starting point, and we did this exercise before, which was here are 30 or 40 things, building blocks that could be considered the word infrastructure. We saw a page with 6 or 7 of them on today, which are kind of top tier. We started to see some measurements and things like that. I think what we need to do is get really tight on a first kind of tranche of these to say, okay, what are the measurements we are going to look for at the highest executive level that hits what we need to see? One of them has to be transportation, and it has to be something like congestion on the roads. And it has to be something like sidewalks in areas where they're needed, right? Just as a basic example. You see good examples with fire when it says 6 minutes. That's real measurable, easy. You see some other things where on water, there's a lot that's being done, but do we have the right measure as we're looking at what we need today, but then where we're headed? So the punchline of all that is I think we need to get to a really specific set of measurements. And then the next thing is, do we have city-adopted policies that says what is acceptable or not? We have a policy here that I assume says 6 minutes or less is response time for fire. What is our policy for congestion in this town?
4 minutes.
What?
He said 4 minutes.
4 minutes drive time, 6 minutes total. So that is where I think we ultimately need to go. And if we go, here's the list of measurements, here's the list of policies that we have or don't have, and then we need to set, then we get into an overlay of how much does it cost? And that becomes less of us all sitting around saying, I want this and I want that, and then more looks at, here's the total thing, can we come up with a policy to prioritize this spend? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Driggs.
Thank you. Mr. Lucaria, you gave a somewhat longer presentation in committee, and it was really critical because two things in particular. For one, the school capacity calculation, as you described it, related to the teachers and whether the building had the room for the teachers. Our conception, I think, and that of the public is that it has more to do with the students. Like they hear you're at 144%, they have an idea that the capacity of the school is 2,000 students and you're actually at 3,000 students or whatever. So since we're constrained for time, it would be great, and maybe I'll get with you about this, if we could have a memo or a reference of some kind that makes it clearer to us how that works, so that as the district people in particular in petitions get confronted, we know. The other part of it was you also explained how you do your forecasting for the growth in the student population. And there were some very interesting points in there about acknowledging existing projects, but not counting them in your projection until they come online, for example. So again, we get challenged a lot about whether or not you guys are properly reflecting that, and it spills over onto us as to whether we are. I would suggest, and I have suggested, we figure out ways to have a more interactive process. You mentioned the rezoning evaluation. So that's it. If you are able to maybe give us something we could look at that explains what you've just told us in greater detail, that would be very helpful.
Be happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And extremely useful, by the way. Appreciate it. On fire, the only thing I'll mention is you talked about these response times. It seems to me they're very dependent on where we go with our roads, right? I mean, you have to be making assumptions about what kind of road infrastructure we have. So that interdependence, I guess, concerns me. I'm kind of working on mobility, but if we don't get our referendum done and start building those roads, then I don't know that the assumptions you're making about response times as you do your planning can be achieved. Is that a concern for you?
Yes, sir. I think with anything, as you said, on the infrastructure side, so what this is all about, it does play into that is the quality of the road, the width of the road, and as we grow, the amount of travel time it takes to get up that road.
Right. Okay. So I'm just saying that's on us as well to be mindful as we do our road planning that it affects fire. On water, Mr. Zer, appreciate your remarks. What assumptions are you making about the outlook for water rates when you do all your projections? Do you have an assumed path at which the rates go up, or how does that work?
Yes, we do. We have a long-term financial model that bakes in these capital forecasts that are generated from the planning efforts.
So are you going to tell us anything about what the assumptions are?
I'm going to stick with brevity on that one and say it could be available. Yeah.
Okay, we've managed to do pretty well in terms of managing the growth of rates, but there's obviously a tension there in terms of the needs and how much we have to charge. Thank you.
Correct.
All right, Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm good. I think it's a very good presentation. I'm interested to learn more specifically around transportation, right? That's the rubber. Thank you.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Bakari, for exercising leadership. I'm going to try and do the same here and keep it brief. For the schools, Dennis, you know, when you came into the committee, that was a great presentation, and you drilled down in some areas, as Mr. Driggs mentioned. I think the most important thing that you said today that bubbled up from that presentation was the 100% utilization number from elementary schools versus the 125 and 135 from middle and high school, and the differentiation of that. I think we've kind of gotten caught up with that because we didn't have that clear understanding. So thank you for adding the clarity there. For fire, you know, it's just fantastic, the work that you guys do in maintaining that Class 1 ISO rating. And that's so critically important from a financial perspective across the board for the city. I am a bit concerned about the 50 stations that are north of 50 years old and how we can strategically address that. And I know within District 1, there are a number of roads where it's very difficult for emergency vehicles to get through and travel down when there's parking on both sides of the street. And I think holistically, we have to look at that from a CDOT perspective to see what we can do. And then lastly, for water, I'll just say, if you haven't gone out and spent some time with water and the director, I spent a half day with them, and we went to a variety of the facilities, including Stowe and Franklin, and it's amazing. It truly is amazing what they do to protect the water supply and the demand and growth. And it's also the reason that our area has become a center for microbreweries throughout the state and the region, is because of the quality of the water. So thank you for that work, Charlotte Water. And that's it, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Liz and team, for this report out. I have a couple of questions specifically for fire. When we look at the hours of training, is that the combination of both paid and unpaid training hours?
Yes, ma'am.
And as far as our EMS, we can't get into it now because that's a longer conversation, but the impact, our total response time of 6 minutes, are we seeing any impact due to the recent changes with Medic and our response times?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll try to make it short. So yes, we just had a very large project with Medic where we did some response reconfiguration with them. It's the first time they've looked at their call types in about 22 years. We have seen an expected drop in our call volume, but we have seen a little bit of an expected increase in the amount of time our companies are spending on scene. We're trying to make sure we get a really good data set on that and what it looks like. We're almost 6 months into it, so the data right now that's what it looks like. Our call volume is down a little bit, but our time on scene has gone up just a little bit more.
So it will be helpful in the future so that we can give you all what you all need in support, if we can get that breakdown, because that total response time is amazing and has been for years. But if that's being challenged because of how long one of the ladders has to stay on scene versus another ladder being called from a further distance to show up when needed, it will be helpful for us to have that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Ajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of my questions were already addressed. Great job with the presentation, all of you. In focus areas, I did not find a focus area for police. Would that be part of our next presentation?
Again, you know, this came from a memo that I released to council back in May of last year, and it was based on the December meeting that we had for the special infrastructure discussion, and then just continued conversations with council, particularly through the rezoning meetings, and trying to prioritize the areas where we were getting the most council questions and needed to do sort of a deeper dive to understand impact from growth to those areas. So we have not listed the next areas for priority to do a deeper dive, but that's certainly one that we could consider.
Yes, I would definitely like to see police as part of our focus areas here. I remember having this conversation back in December of last year that Councilmember Johnson was leading, where over the past several months, we have discussed police response time being an issue, and I know there was a presentation done on that, but that continues to be an issue from the emails that I have been receiving. And I think we do need to address that as part of our overall key performance indicator. How do we measure that performance? So I would like to see police being included as part of our key focus areas, because safety is our number one priority. If people don't feel safe, we can't focus on other things. I think we need to include that. Also, streets and sidewalks. We have seen fatalities, especially pedestrian fatalities. So sidewalks, I would like to see that being added as one of our key focus areas. And I'm not talking about a mile or two. I mean, we need to make significant improvement when it comes to sidewalks and really prevent fatalities from happening. There is disproportionate number of fatalities where pedestrian is involved, and we got to do everything we can to make sure that we are providing safe environments for those who are walking. I mean, we're talking about children going to school. I live in a neighborhood where we don't have sidewalks where children can walk to schools. I see unpaved road and kids are walking. It's really unsafe. So I think we got to add that. So I would like to see those two things being added. So when I talk about sidewalks, I'm talking about overall street network. It's just providing safer streets. So that includes sidewalks, bike lanes, overall safer environment. So
Yes, ma'am. And transportation was one of the 5 that we identified as focus areas. So we plan to come back with more information after the first of the year.
okay, so I do see under transportation, you got NCDOT and federal highways. So that includes all of the above that I
Yes, ma'am.
mentioned. Okay.
And
All right, that's-
Mr. Jones wanted to,
Thank you, Councilmember Ashmore. So I want to just make sure that, I guess it's level setting. One of the reasons that, so you are 100% correct, police came up, and I really appreciate the conversation that we had around police and response times and 911 call takers and things of that nature. And so I appreciate what's happened with CMPD and the budget staff, Ryan Bergman, and how we've been able to begin to address some of those issues. What I would say, the reason that we put fire in, and Liz, I think I'm okay with this, you tell me if I'm not, is because basically fire is more dependent on the placement of stations, and police is more dependent on the staffing. So I'd like for us to be able to go through these 5 areas first before we start adding, because I'd like to try to perfect that a little bit. And my commitment to you is we'll continue to give you updates of where we are with these, 911 calls and things of that nature as it relates to police response times.
Yeah, I think I'll just push back on that a little bit, Mr. Jones, because I think when we talk about police and police stations are very important, I think where they are located, it's also very important, similar to fire stations, because that does create a safe environment. So I would like to see that as part of this, and certainly it can be eliminated later, but I would like to see that added, because I think a facility, the place where it's located, it's crucial for fire stations as well. I mean, police station. That's all. Thank you.
all right. Ms. Molina?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I won't belabor a point. I think by the time you get to me, we've had a lot of good feedback from my colleagues. I think each one of you are doing an amazing job. I've actually spent some time with our water department. I spent an entire day with them. They took me across our city and our county, and I learned so much about the infrastructure of our water systems and the interconnectedness of it all. So I have absolutely no feedback in that regard. I think the Mayor Pro Tem was even, speaking to the capacity of, your bond rating, et cetera. I mean, kudos Our fire, of course, when I went and I spent some time with our fire department, just a little bit, not really what you would say feedback, but I did get some feedback from some of the members at one of our East Charlotte stations. A lot of the times you guys, and this is unrelated to infrastructure, so maybe this is a one-off that we can talk about afterwards, but I want to raise this up and let you know that I see you. A lot of the times our fire are the first to respond to an emergency, and sometimes from the feedback that I've been given, you don't have the proper infrastructure sometimes depending upon the call to respond. So I want you to know that I'm aware of that. I'm prepared to have conversations, and I'm sure, you know, our amazing manager is in a position where he's already hearing some of that feedback as well. So as we continue to have those conversations, it is of particular interest to me to make sure that our fire stations are as equipped as possible to respond to the emergencies of our constituents here in Charlotte. So I want to give you that and also tell you guys a great job. And I look forward to continuing to receive updates from you. As far as our school system, I think the happiest thing for me was on page 10, where we talked about the integration of the CMS data, where you can actually see that now. And that we have some information that's going to kind of correspond with some of what we actually do here from an infrastructure perspective. So I'm really excited about that, to see how it develops, and I'm looking forward to the continued updates. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Liz, and your team for the update. I'm happy to be having the conversation. This conversation is so important when we talk about balanced growth. I do have a question for Dennis. You know I would, right? Because I'm always talking about school impact during our rezonings, especially in District 4. Well, no, citywide, but I'm, as a District 4 representative, I talk about it. So, a challenge for me has been, when we look at school capacity, I understand what you're saying on how it's calculated, but when we look at school capacity, we're not, the number's not growing with our approved petitions. So we can have a school petition from 2022 that might say Mallard Creek Elementary is at 121%. And I could probably pull up a petition in 2023 with the same numbers. We are not calculating school capacity at a cumulative level. So we can, and that's been my challenge. And so can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you for the question. I'll try and be brief. So what we're looking at is actually a snapshot of each year as it happens. And when I talked about things that the Board of Education does to itself, one of those things is something called student-weighted staffing, where we actually allot additional human beings to a school that has greater needs. And so those things then can drive down a classroom size. It can actually look like a classroom teacher with a smaller student-teacher ratio because of those additional resources, which then increases the utilization. So what we're actually looking at is the condition on the ground at that time from the school relative to the time a petition comes into play. And I think, as Councilman Driggs mentioned, the challenge is until a development is actually built and we start recognizing students from there while we're planning for that and we see it on this side, what we're actually reporting is the conditions on the ground for a given school year at that school at that time.
Exactly. So even if we have 5 petitions for the same school, it's going to have the same number. So that's my challenge from a resident's perspective. We know that there's all of this growth and it's not being measured. So that's, and we can talk offline. I don't know if there's a way that you can, that these numbers can be a little more cumulative, but that's been my challenge, especially for, fast-growing areas like Mallard Creek and those in District 4. I know that we're using the same numbers and we're not calculating or considering.
It's a challenge for us too, because when a petition is rezoned, as you well know, that doesn't mean a development's actually going to occur. It just means somebody's got those entitlements. And so that's part of that feedback loop that I think we need to work on.
Okay, thank you. And then I want to ask City Water a question. You mentioned the capacity assurance program. Can we take a look at that slide?
Yes.
Thank you. So during that slide, I heard you say there was an area that didn't have the capacity, so we paused the permits in that area. Is that what I heard?
Yes, that was the area, northern eastern part of the county that flows over to Cabarrus County. Yes.
So that was the reason that when I talked about the infrastructure and pushed for the infrastructure, I wanted us to look at areas. Are there particular areas where there may not be capacity or an acceptable level of capacity? And if we should look at slowing down the growth in those areas. So I was happy to hear that that's at least considered. From the way that the water is reviewing the growth, are you all looking at the growth on a cumulative level?
Yes.
Or okay. So you're not just looking at each petition and how it's affecting the, okay, good.
No, there is a very large detailed database behind all of that counts that flow in every single pipe in our system.
So you're counting approved petitions that have been approved and not billed yet, how that's going to impact?
Once they come into the capacity assurance program, yes.
Okay. I'd love to take a look at that. So that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to piggyback off what Councilmember Ashmira said. This is great, Mr. Jones, but as a growing city, one of the largest cities in the country, we have to be looking at all of these things at the same time. I had this discussion with another council member earlier. We're a big city, and we really have to, to behave like one. So I think we need to take a look at safety for sure, and all of the areas. I was driving on 77 from the north side, and I didn't have service on my phone from Statesville to, until I was close to the office. So there's all these kind of areas that we have to consider as we're growing. That's all I have for now. Thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Brown, welcome to your first setting, and we're sorry that you're not feeling so well, but feel free to
Just
address any
observing,
question.
taking notes.
All right.
I do not feel good at all.
I see. Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
attending. Okay, so that worked really well. Thank you, Mr. Bakari, for helping us meet that kind of 3-minute rule, and we did it very well. So, Mr. Jones, what's next for us?
Yes, Mayor, so the last item that we have for the action review, is an update on Eastland. I believe the last time we had a discussion, we said we would come back to you within, before the end of the year, and here is an opportunity to tell you where we are.
I'm actually going to have Todd DeLong step in and do this presentation, but I've given him the goal of doing this in less than 10 minutes. So I'm just going to really quickly set the stage that tonight is just simply an update. We are making significant progress, and the team's coming together to continue to make progress. Some of the big things that we continue to work on is the indoor facility layout, the governance structure, Todd will talk about a little bit, the site layout, as well as the pricing. The pricing has changed, and so we anticipate that we'll be back in front of you in first quarter to really drill into where we think the numbers are and where we think the public investment needs to be. So with that, Todd, you got 9.5 minutes now.
Thank you, Tracy. Real quickly, I'd like to start off every update presentation just with kind of lifting us up to where we are on the site, thinking more holistically about the site and the entire 80 acres, not just one part or 120 acres here or 20 acres over there. Just a reminder that what we're doing out here is really building a community and creating an atmosphere that's been desired by the community for a number of years, and we're starting to get there. As an example of that progress, we have a building on the site, which is really exciting to see an actual building coming out of the ground. It's a 70-unit senior affordable housing development project. They're putting the roofing on now and look to doing interior finishes next year with a completion date towards the late fall of 2024. Also making progress here on the park and with the multifamily or mixed-use development project here. Just last month, council approved a transaction to the county, which would provide the county with 4.5 acres to build a $12.3 million park, which they're already under design right now and look to finish hopefully by the end of 2026. We're also in the near finish line of closing on a piece of property with Carlson Southeast, which is a 280-unit market rate multifamily unit development project that will have 15 to 16,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space, which the city will actually take on a master lease and will then sublet to targeted tenants who are minority, women-owned businesses, particularly those locally on the east and East Charlotte. So we're really excited about that opportunity as well. So there's a lot of progress being made throughout the property. So the following slides are going to provide a brief update from October when we presented the product of the two teams working together for about 40 days. I want to remind everybody, when we presented in October, they had literally 30 to 40 days of actually working together, getting to know each other, understanding the different dynamics with each other's programs, understanding where the complements, where maybe some overlaps or efficiencies. So it's really exciting to see the progress that's been made since October and since September, actually, when we've kind of given that charge. Overall, the indoor and outdoor programs have remained the same, looking at a 120,000-foot facility, indoor facility with multi-purpose courts, which could be converted to 10 basketball courts, 16 volleyball courts, 30 pickleball courts, a mix of food and beverage, a fitness center, an ice rink, leasable space, think for healthcare providers or tenants, STEM education, and a community learning center on the outdoor perspective. Still looking at 6 multi-sport artificial turf fields that would serve events ranging from soccer, flag football, lacrosse, field hockey, et cetera. And then a food and beverage entertainment pad that could comprise about 6,000 to 12,000 square feet restaurant space, also with 800 parking spaces. The community impact, which is really important to this project and what we're looking at here, making sure that the project is inclusive of the community and making sure the community can actually utilize and use the space. Still looking at the community learning center, that's evolving into what it is, what it needs to be. A STEM education center, neighborhoods access to the facilities, multiple food and beverage options within the facility and outside of the facility, and opportunities for select cultural and arts events and festivals. So in October, action was taken after the teams had, again, about 45 days to get to know each other and to consider each other's program and determine whether there was an approach for a successful outcome. While encouraged partnerships aren't necessarily ideal, this is one that we've seen the two teams come together quickly, identify complementary and overlapping programming elements. At the time, council also approved the funding that was previously considered and proposed for each of the proposals. And when I say that, I mean each of the proposals, when they're independent from each other, they requested $20 million in hospitality funds and about $10 million in infrastructure funds. And that's where that $30 million in allocated funding came through and was approved by council in October. As part of our conversation in October, there were questions about the organizational structure, meaning who are the leadership of these organizations, who will be the leader of the LLCs that might be created. So this is what we've received from the development team so far. The parent company, which will be an LLC formed, it'll comprise Charlotte Soccer Academy, Southern Entertainment, Edge Sports Global, and Ivory Canty and Bolton LLC. The advisory committees would include members from the community, investors, and operators. I know the advisory committees and the public input and public participation on this was really important to some council members. I want to make sure that we're still keeping this top of mind as we're continuing to evolve the concept and conversations with the development team. So since October, the team, particularly the indoor team, has focused primarily on interior programming and the building layout. They're actively engaging potential tenants for the indoor space. Think, again, healthcare, physical therapy tenants, partnerships with Charlotte Soccer Academy, as well as the indoor sports facility. They need to determine what is the appropriate layout and site programming or facility programming, which ultimately gets into a refined cost estimate for that space. For example, if a healthcare provider was originally thought to maybe include 15,000 square feet of space, but now maybe they want 40 or 50,000 square feet of space, that impacts what the overall size of that building is and ultimately impacts what the potential cost estimates are for that space. So right now we're looking, and they're working really hard of engaging with those tenants, what that looks like, what are their spacing needs, and we'll be coming back to council later next year with an update of what those conversations have been and what we look like from a site layout within the building and potential cost estimates or revised estimates for the indoor and outdoor facilities. The outdoor facilities, they're still looking at refining the cost estimates and the scope of the fields and the related improvements such as sidewalks, parking, and other improvements like that. Infrastructure, we've had to get into a little bit more into the details and the weeds. In the last month or two, we continue to have to work a little bit more into kind of getting a more detailed look of what's going on there, which requires a really strong coordination with the Crossland Southeast team. As you're aware, Crossland Southeast is currently underway in construction activity on the site. They've already started moving dirt on that site. They're doing grading. They're doing some limited improvements on that side of the site. So we really need to work hard with them to really identify where their scope stops and this team's scope begins. That way we're accounting for all the required infrastructure improvements, but we're also reducing or mitigating the potential for actually duplicative scope items that we don't want to pay twice for, or we may have to restart and tear up and build again. So we're really making sure that we're really getting aligned there. Infrastructure reimbursement items that we would consider here are retaining walls, grading, water and sewer line installation, streetscape, and streets. Some examples where costs would actually be going higher than we might have originally anticipated. If you see where the building is for the indoor sports facility, we do anticipate additional retaining walls to support the construction of that building at that location. So that would also increase the cost from what we previously understood. Additional would be demo and grading that might support the dynamic related to the fields as well as some of the parking areas. So when we talk about next steps, there's a lot of work still yet to do. Our last update included some great work from the team, especially given they had about 30 to 40 days to pull the information together for us. We're now into the next round of due diligence and analysis to further refine the scope of work for both the infrastructure as well as the sports facilities. And we plan to come back into Q1 of 2024 with another update and potential requests for additional public investment funding for the site. Now, we don't know exactly what the range is, but it could be somewhere in the range total of $35 to $45 million. That's not, let me repeat it, that's not additional, that is total. So it'd be an additional $5 to $15 million above what was already allocated by council in October. That's just, again, that's a really rough range that we're working through now, and that's why we want to continue doing the work with the team and the consultants to make sure we're getting the scope of work correct, accurate, and we're doing it right. Questions?
Before, I want to go back when you talked about the potential request for additional public investment. Can you clarify that, what that really means? I mean, I get what it's saying, but help me understand better what it means.
So when in October we allocated, we had council approved $30 million of public funding to go toward the project. $20 million of that was in hospitality funds, and $10 million of that was geared towards infrastructure funding. We're finding through some preliminary work is that the cost estimates for the infrastructure work is higher than what was originally planned for each of the proposals because of the work of we're basically maximizing the site. We're putting a lot of pressure on the site that's already constrained by size, grade, and other challenges, physical challenges that are with the site. So what we think is going to happen, we're pretty confident, at least on the infrastructure side, the costs are going to exceed $10 million. And so we're working with the consultant team now to understand what that cost is to come back to council with a better update and more details of what that looks like.
I heard you say that we have additional opportunities for square footage and that, you know, there are opportunities that are coming along. Wouldn't that be a cost of doing business because you are going to be working with people that are joining in with the group? You used the example of, you know, if you have a building that's going to be 40 square foot and now it's 4,000, and they would have that cost because they weren't a part of the deal. Mm-hmm. So is that what you're saying, the potential cost for additional public investment is because of the strain on it? Or I'm not really quite sure, but I know there are going to be lots of questions, so we can go ahead and start going around, but I really think that this potential request for additional public investment, we worked really hard on this to get to a place that we thought would be supported by the community, and I'm just a little bit surprised by the potential request for additional public investment. But we'll go ahead. I'm going to start with Ms. Brown, I know that you've probably read a little bit in the paper about it, but let's go ahead if you have any questions. But we'll start with Ms. Johnson. Any questions? And we'll try to keep it to our questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not surprised. I think that we've seen with the cost of construction and the infrastructure is older on this site, that I don't know why we would be surprised when we approved the housing tax credit. The builders came back to us and asked for an additional, I think, $12 million or so. So I think right now that's the environment that we're in, and I'm not surprised that they're asking for more money to get this job done. I don't think that we should let this stand in the way. These residents on the east side have been waiting for this for over a decade, and we're almost there. We're about to cross the finish line, and I don't think that we can again, be surprised when we've given additional funding to developers who come to us because of the cost of business and environment. So I think we should keep that same energy, and let's get this project done. Thank you.
I agree with you, the same energy. I'm just trying to figure out whether it's the same energy that's causing it. Ms. Molina?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to preface a statement and say I'm going to be the last person as a 20-year Charlottean and East Sider to say that, we shouldn't be going directly for what will, I guess, be a great decision and making the right fiscal decision from a policymaker perspective. But I have so many questions that I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. I'm actually going to start with the organizational structure because that's something that I'm particularly interested in because we kind of have this vague understanding of what this means based on the chart that's in front of us. And particularly with the advisory committee, I'm interested in how those people will be selected. Are they appointed? Are they selected? Will they go through an application process? How do we make sure that if there's going to be something that is advisory, that we are inclusive? I think that's very important when we talk about what our deliverables are, because the scope of representation that actually would encompass East Charlotte in particular would be specific to 3 districts, 1, 6, and 5, and actually some of 4. There's a particular piece of 4 that is the far eastern portion where the people would be particularly interested in what happens with this infrastructure project. So I would like some clarity around how, because again, this is all encompassing. This is making sure that when we talk about what the deliverables are and who's at the table and who has a voice, how can we be absolutely inclusive with that voice? We had a whole lot of passion when this was, in front of us as a body, and we heard from 2 very divergent groups in what they would like to have happen. And I think it would be a mistake to be including just one, whether it be the ones that were for one or for the other. I think in the spirit of cooperation, we should, be inclusive with advising as well from a cooperative perspective. I also share a concern with the mayor. Primarily from a policy perspective, we have a primary fiduciary responsibility. We make decisions around money that the taxpayers, trust us to make great decisions with. And so we have to, I would like to double click on that and understand what that additional funding means. From a committee perspective, I remember in committee, we went round and round on some of the issues that we saw, and now those items are resurfacing, I'm afraid. And so I don't really know how we govern to that portion of the fact that, from a committee perspective, there were some granular items that had very specific questions that could not be answered. And like I said, I know this is a one-off, but I need to raise that with you. We have to sit down and I have to understand this. And I would even recommend that our chair and vice chair, if they're still the same, and I'm assuming they are, that we delve in and really deep dive into this to make sure that we understand what we're talking about fiscally, because it would also be a tragedy to say that we're trying to make this work at the expense of there not being, brevity, enough brevity to what we're looking at. In other words, I'm saying in the most surface level terms as possible, if it fails, to what avail? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, we're not just throwing money in this to keep it from failing. If failing is inevitable, then we need to talk about that too, right? So if this is something that is, seemingly not working out, first of all, I really appreciate everything that you and the team in economic development are doing. I appreciate the cooperation from both sides. It is, I will continue to say, an unprecedented experience to have two groups that were competing to be, the team to win, so to speak, and then to have them to work together. That's an amazing feat. But we got to double click on this, and I won't belabor a point, but I definitely am requesting a lot more information around, and I'm bringing up those in particular, but I probably got about 4 or 5 more, so you're going to need to sit down with me.
Absolutely.
And give me more information. I need it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I share some of the concerns that Councilmember Molina raised, especially the formation of the advisory committee. I think we need to better understand that, and what role would council be playing in that, in selecting the advisory committee. That's number one. Number two, I'm just taken back by, it says, continuing analysis to determine scope for infrastructure improvements. I thought this was part of the due diligence work that was already done as 2 months ago, and it's only been 2 months or even less than 2 months, and we have a ask. I mean, this is a little bit different than affordable housing, where market had changed over the course of 6 months or almost a year. This has just been 2 months, so I'm just I'm surprised. Let me say this very nicely. I'm not sure if we were given the accurate information when we went through the whole due diligence 2 months ago. So to come back and say we need $10 million more, or maybe 10 million, just 2 months later, I didn't expect this. But let me be very clear. I think Eastland is something that is near and dear to my heart. I think we always find dollars for key projects, and Eastland is definitely something that is one of the catalysts that East Side has asked for, and they waited for decades to come. So we need to do everything in our power to make this happen. But I think we need to take our time and really make sure that we are doing all of our due diligence before we put a number out there, so that there is not a third time that you're going to come back to council and say, hey, we need more funding, because that's not good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sharing the concerns of some of my colleagues, I was very clear when we had this last conversation that my expectation will be this 30 million will be it. So if we're going to even entertain additional conversation, for me, it will be helpful to know exactly how much additional funding that has been contributed by all of the investors for this project, to ensure that we're not creating a new line item for some of the partners, not others, so that we have consistency in this development. Also, looking at that really as a breakdown. What is the breakdown of the business interests, the investments up to this point? If we're looking at an additional potential 5 or 10 million, which I can pretty much already tell you it's not going to sit well for me, then I think as a council, we need to have a different conversation with the expectation of that housing. So using tax dollars, and what we're talking about is a market rate housing project that's going to have some possible affordability for small businesses on that ground level, when we know the need today, even though this is a conversation that we've been having for over a decade and a lot of development has happened, the need today is very diverse in our housing stock. And when we're talking about the employees that potentially will be working at any of these facilities, whether you're the greeter at the door, the hostess, or the ball male or female for the sports part, can they even afford to live in these units? Because if we're not doing that, we're missing the opportunity to put some very specific expectations that if you want to have access to additional funds, mandate very clear, here is what is expected for this development, for who has access to live here, so that we do not create what we have in South End when we approve TOD and some other things along the light rail, where the individuals who will most likely use our public transportation system have been displaced from our transportation system. So if there's even a consideration, I hope this council is very solid in moving that conversation forward of what our clear expectations are regarding housing, and I'm not talking about 10 units. That's not going to work. So when we're looking at the potential, because we could track the numbers on everything. Numbers don't lie, but they can be manipulated all day. But we could track the numbers on how many potential employees we're looking at, and instead of looking at that average, let's look at those lowest paid workers, those entry-level workers, and is this something that's going to be accessible to them? But the idea of allocating additional funds, when I thought we were all very clear that 30 million was going to be it, again, as Councilmember Ajmir mentioned, in less than a month to come back and say, well, we think we might need another 5 or 10 million, but we don't really know how much. We do not have a magic money tree in the back. These are tax dollars that we're utilizing. And as Councilmember Molina mentioned, our ultimate responsibility is to be respectful of tax dollars. And this conversation seems a little on that line of getting very close to being disrespectful unless we can clearly state who, what, when, where, and why. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also agree with my previous colleagues as it relates to the governance structure, and in particular, the makeup of the advisory committee. We need to have some clarity on that. But I also strongly believe that we need a deeper dive into the financial stack of this particular project, as the housing activities investments that we did were brought up, and that was a very different environment, and it was under a much longer tail. And so we knew that the market would potentially change. This has been a short window of 2 months, and the macro financial environment has not changed very much at all as it relates to construction costs. What has changed is the cost of paper, right? The cost of capital. And so if this additional ask is to cover the increase of cost of capital for a project that I don't believe we should cover, we need to understand the financial health state of the partners that are involved in this project, as well as understand the inner workings of the financial stack, and have a level of comfortability. So we need some kind of confidence perspective or confidence number as it relates to that financial stack. So I'll keep it there, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
So, Mayor, members of council, I appreciate the feedback, and I think everybody associated with this project appreciates the feedback. We committed to give you an update. We're continuing to work with all the parties, and we won't bring forward something to you until we've continued to scrub numbers, have conversations, things like that. I think it would have been worse if we came to you today and didn't express to you that there could be some costs issues. So that's it. We will continue to have these conversations, but we committed to have this conversation at the last, business meeting of the year, and that's what we're doing.
Okay. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to try to be very consistent with my position over the last 11 months, right? One, there's a lot of progress being made at Eastland. And I think it's the senior housing, the park, the market rate housing, the retail space, et cetera, buildings coming out of the ground. We're delivering on the expectation that we said we were going to do. So I think I'm glad you started that way, because it's just not these 20 acres, it's the whole site. And the whole site is being really developed. The teams are not two teams anymore, they're one. They're making a lot of progress working together to try to identify a singular vision for the remaining 28 or so acres. And so I'm glad that both teams are collaborating, are working together, et cetera. Pricing is a concern for me as well, but I've been consistently saying that if we go this route, we own it. we own it. We cannot allow this to fail. There needs to be project engineering, value engineering. I've talked to both, the developer about the necessity for value engineering the project to bring the price down to a level that we can afford. I think it's really important that we understand all the cards on the tables, and I'm talking about the financial cards, who's bringing what to the table, that we get a clear understanding of that for sure. And that if we're going to make an investment, that we have a facility that once it opens has the ability to compete with others in the region. So we just can't build a building and say we have done it. We got to make sure that the building, that's the easy part, and that's pretty hard. Right? The hard part is the day-to-day operation management and maintenance of the facility once it's built. And so we need to assure ourselves that we have a building that can compete and that we don't, I'm contradicting myself, value engineering this thing to the point that it doesn't compete once it opens, right? And so this is an update. The manager is correct. Right now, it's not in committee. Hopefully the mayor will reassign it back to the committee for the deep dive that's necessary. If that's what the council wants, I'm just throwing it out. I'm just based on what I'm hearing, right? But, my hope and desire is that we can get to the finish line sooner or later with this project, like January, early February, that we know what we're doing, where we're going, how much it's going to cost facility for the region. Somehow, I didn't see anywhere about CRVA, as an aside, making sure that we have an entity to help us market this facility once it's built for the type of competitions and programming we're going to need to make sure that we sustain the viability of the building once it's built, right? So I think this is a great update. We all know where we stand. I'm going to be very consistent with my remarks and that we own it. Thank you.
So I share the consternation that has been expressed by some of my colleagues. I'm not sure what this is exactly. On the one hand, it seems to describe a pretty well-developed plan and then tell us, oh, by the way, it's up to how much more?
5 to 15.
What was the range you said the overage could be, as much as 10 or possibly more than 10?
Well, right now, we're still working through it, but the range I threw out was $5 to $15 million.
So I say again?
I said $5 to $15 million is the
Between
range.
$5 and $15 million, okay? Let's be clear, that's 50%, okay? And I just would have appreciated maybe a little bit of quiet outreach as to whether we are okay, because I think we were all pretty clear about the 30, and I think it was a very bold move that we protected $30 million in the face of that possible other tennis thing and so on. And so I don't know whether a lot of work has gone into getting the planning and the development of the whole thing this far. I don't know how much of the 15 potentially million was intended to come from hospitality and how much from general fund. I don't know whether the other funding sources are stepping up or whether we're being asked to absorb the entire increase. I just think this was really a poor way to present this to us. I feel like I'm in an awkward situation here, sitting in front of these cameras and being told that we may have to go up by about 50%. So if you are looking for a nod from this group tonight to proceed along these lines, I can tell you pretty surely you don't have one. Thank you.
Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, I'm frustrated as well. Let me do my best to just give everyone an overview of a reminder and an overview of what I know, having tracked this. The reminder, I think, is pretty simple, and I hope no one has forgotten it. We had two very strong, good teams competing with each other, and they both had plans to do different things that were going to pencil at $30 million each, which we set aside. We were gridlocked, and we came up with the ability to work together to come up with something that says, can you guys do something unprecedented and work together? Everyone behind the scenes at that moment who accepted that challenge also knew it would cost more. They absolutely knew it, but they knew the first order of business, which is what they've been doing since then, is working together. So the first update, which everyone hopefully should have heard and was the punchline of today, is it's not two teams anymore, it's one. They're working very well together from every update I've gotten, and that has resulted in a singular plan. Now, the second parts to this that I think are not as clear, but they are, it's going to cost more. It was two separate things that are now pulled together. So when you look at what it's going to cost more, it is directionally understood from what I have learned so far. Number one, the infrastructure is going to cost substantially more, not because of capital, but because the numbers that were being thrown around for a long time in this were pre-2019 numbers for infrastructure. Substantially changed on their own just because of that merit, let alone the scope that's there. The second biggest driver is the building itself. And option A had 1/3 of the footprint of that entire building. Option B had 3/3 in various stages that now are all in one stage. So it's all happening at once. So that is a substantial increase, and the infrastructure needs to make it work in pencil. But the positive silver lining is it substantially increased the ROI and the economic impact of the deal. So, if we got here, to Mr. Graham's point, by coming up with something that we own because we asked this to happen. The fact that we're not as up to date as we should be on exactly what it costs, I know some of the numbers need to be stress tested, and that's what needs to happen by staff going forward. But anyone who thinks like it is anything other than the puzzle pieces we as a group have set on the table before us, with the group in two teams that have become one that is working absolutely in almost unimaginable terms together to bring forth something that is not only bigger than where we had before with them, but creates a bigger economic impact to a very significant tune. I mean, that's where we are. So I think this definitely could have been more clearly stated to us. And like staff always does, they don't want to get ahead of too much. They want to give a little piece of information and get people used to it. So there it is. I just told you everything that I've been updated on all along this path. And I think that staff has to get there before they get to a point where they're comfortable telling you a number. But if anyone is scared about the number was the number and we have to stop there, then we need to go back and reevaluate everything that we did from the beginning, because two teams can't come together, one with two scopes that are different, to make this happen. So I hope that's a refresher and an understanding that there have been significant work, including by staff, in these last several weeks and months to get to this point, and I feel like it's been overshadowed a bit by some misunderstanding.
Great job, colleague. So, staff, thank you for where we are at today, and heavy it up when you have two teams now together as one. So let's talk about the infrastructure, if we may. I think Councilman Bakari said, I think the most important thing, the numbers were early based on 2019. So here we are at 2023, and we really need to do an in-depth study on the infrastructure and the status of all those old pipes, that dirt has been out there for quite some time. So my question is, Todd, how long do you think we can do that feasibility study to get to that real number? We talking about the low end, 5 million. So give me your timeline that we can do the infrastructure study.
My best guess at this point in time is Land Design is working on that right now with the development team. With the holidays getting in the way, that kind of sets some things back. We're looking to come back to council with an update first quarter of next year.
Okay.
So hopefully by mid to late January, we've had a chance to kind of see what Land Design has done. And then
Okay.
we can tweak what they've done and figure out where we need to go from there. And again, come back to council afterwards, after we've had a chance to kind of go through, analyze, and assess the information that's been demonstrated so far. At the same time, making sure that the scope aligns well with where Crossland is and where they're going to stop. Because that's one of the unique situations we have here, is we already have a developer
Who's
doing the
currently
work
out there.
on the site. And we want to make sure that we're accounting for everything that needs to be done while also not duplicating something that's going to be done.
And to level set council, because there's two buckets of revenue, right? We got the hospitality and we got general fund. I think it'd be helpful when you come back just to show where those funds are coming from. How much is coming from hospitality? How much is coming from the general fund? Just so we all can level set. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, Ms. Watlington?
Thank you. I'm not surprised necessarily that with a larger scope that there may be larger costs with the project. What I'm more so interested in is, as many have said before, is what each team member, if you will, is bringing to the table, because I don't think that an increase in 5 to 15 million necessarily means an increase to 5 to 15 million of public investment. So I'd be very interested to see what these updated financials look like. If the ROI is greater, awesome. I'd like to see specifically what we can expect on the public side for any increase in public funding. So I look forward to that work when it is available. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I want to say a couple of things before we move downstairs. The chamber is full, absolutely full. That I want everyone to remember that if we have to recess the meeting, we should recess the meeting and everyone on the dais walks out to follow our public safety folks, okay? This is something that we've had to do, seldom had to do, but I hope that we don't have to do it tonight. But I do think a reminder is very much warranted. And also, a reminder of our policy is that we do not do resolutions and proclamations that address political issues. And so that's where our policy statement is now. So thank you, everyone, for the attention. This was a really good meeting, and let's adjourn to downstairs. everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Charlotte City Council business meeting on this December, I think it's December the 4th, right? So welcome to those that are watching as well on our video channel or any other device that you have, whether we're being streamed as for this meeting. So with that, I'd like to call the Charlotte City Council business meeting to order, and we'll begin with introductions of those who are with us at the dais. We'll start with our city attorney.
Good evening, Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Good evening, Victoria Watlinson at large.
Good evening, Luana Mayfield, council member at large.
Tarp Card, District 6.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Good evening, Dante Anderson, Mayor Pro Tem, District 1.
Good evening, Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Good evening, everyone. James Mitchell at large.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, and I'm honored to represent District 4.
Good evening, I am Marjorie Molina. I represent District 5.
Happy holidays, Dimple Ajmera at large.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
All right. All right. We begin our meeting with an expression of an inspiration for all of us as we continue to address this community's issues and needs and wants. And so what we do is we ask that we have one of our council members speak to us to start our meeting. And tonight, Councilmember Johnson will give our words of wisdom to us. And then immediately that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you choose to participate in this effort, just know that it's understandable if you do not, because this is for us to actually solemnize what we're doing and to be able to do this for you with respect and dignity. So with that, I'll recognize Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really honored to be doing this today in December, this month of this holy month, and there are 14 religious holidays in December. So I want to acknowledge and recognize everyone for the diversity and wish you happy holidays. Grant us, O Lord, a vision of your world as your love would have it, a world where the weak are protected and none are hungry or poor, a world where the riches of creation are shared and everyone can enjoy them, a world where different races and cultures live in harmony and mutual respect, a world where peace is built with justice and justice is guided by love. Give us the inspiration and the courage to build it through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen, Renee.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you choose to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Got a nice little picture.
This is the time that we hold a public hearing that we have so that people in our community can address and petition the city council. There are some rules and guidelines for this, and so I'd like to first give you that kind of why we do this. We have a speakers list, and you have to sign up in advance, and we have 15 speakers. Each speaker has 2 minutes to which to address the council. And then that will be a timer that will be set, and when those 2 minutes are up, then we have a bell, and then we move to the next person that wishes to speak. In addition to that, we ask that we all look and think about this as we are talking about very important issues for these individuals as they come down, and that we allow them to have the ability to speak clearly and openly to us and respect that time that they give to us. As a part of our meeting, we also know that we may not be able to address everything that has come before us as a request. And after this meeting is over, the city manager or someone in his office will send out a letter or something that's necessary to do a follow-up for anyone that is speaking today. So with that, those are our rules and guidelines. Did I leave anything off, Mr. Baker?
No, Madam Mayor, you did not.
All right, thank you. So we're going to begin with, we have two podiums. I always say these steps are very steep, but many of you know that. They know that the steps are already steep because I see some people in the audience that have already come to participate. So we're going to start off with two speakers. The first two are Matt Olin and Thomas Young. So please come down. I see Matt. Mr. Young, please come down. All right. Mr. Olin, would you like to go ahead? You have 2 minutes.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor Lyles, City Manager Jones, and honorable members of City Council. My name is Matt Olin. I'm the co-founder of Charlotte is Creative, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring that our city's artists and creative entrepreneurs thrive as small businesses. Tonight, I'm actually here to praise city staff for truly putting themselves to the service of the community, and in our case, to the creative community. Specifically, I'd like to acknowledge Urban Design Center Manager Aaron Chantry, Assistant Economic Development Director Holly Eskridge, Community Engagement Division Manager Nicole Story, and Arts and Culture Officer Priya Sarkar. These four remarkable women appeared on our October 16th Power Panel event, which brought together local, state, regional, and national grant makers from the City of Charlotte, North Carolina Arts Council, the Foundation for the Carolinas, the Knight Foundation, ASC, Women's Impact Fund, the South Arts, and the National Endowment for the Arts. To our knowledge, this is the first time anyone in Charlotte has pulled together this breadth of grant-making entities all together in one room so that the Charlotte artists and creatives can have direct access to them, learn about available funding, and what makes a strong application. Our Power Panel series is just one of currently 18 running programs, all designed to help Charlotte's underconnected, undersupported, and under-resourced artists and creatives thrive as entrepreneurs, and to have 4 members of city staff present at that meeting to give of their time after hours is a mark of the true commitment that our city has to our creative and entrepreneurial communities. They have helped put us one step closer to our ultimate goal, which is for Charlotte to become known as the most welcoming and supportive community in America for creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And we at Charlotte Creative wanted to make sure you were aware of how above and beyond your team went and to share how grateful we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Young. Mr. Young, and we do not allow signs behind people that are speaking. We want them to represent their voices, and so if you would pull back your signs and not put them in this direction, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. All right. Mr. Young, thank you.
I'm Thomas Young, and tonight I come to let y'all know it's in for an era. Tonight, I'm retiring for solid waste service. 20 years of service.
I think that's an applause.
I want you to know that I gave the best every day. I wore the uniform with pride and dignity. And I want to represent our department with a lot of pride. No one prouder than the department. Much passion I have and love I have for the community. So everyone around Charlotte, around the areas in Charlotte, I want you to know, I serve your area with dignity and pride every day. Every day I pull in that green and blue and gray uniform.
All right.
I represent the city with great pride.
All right.
So I wish everyone a happy Merry Christmas and a New Year. Thank you for your time.
No, we thank you, Mr. Young. Thank Thank you. I don't know if Mr. Jones asked you to come down here or not, but I want you to know how much we appreciate it. Thank you so very much. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, our next two speakers are Preston Hagman and Ann Gross. All right. If you just state your name, I'm sure that I called it out, but I want to make sure it's on the record for being on the dictation thing.
Good evening. My name is Preston Hagman. I'm representing the ACR, the Airport Community Roundtable, or noise abatement. I want to make you guys aware of what we've been doing over these years. We represent a number of professionals, corporate pilots, commercial pilots, community leaders, and the north and south flows of the airport. And as you know, the original Part 150 that started was in the late 90s, and now we have a new 150 that's going to be coming out late 2024. As things have changed, in the 90s, when the original original 150 came out, Charlotte was a lot smaller. Now Charlotte is the 10th busiest airport in the country. We've got a 4th parallel runway that's going to be coming online in 2028, and we have large communities that's growing north and south of the airport. So what our job to do as concerned citizens is to make sure that we use our expertise as pilots and community leaders to make sure that the 150 is adhered to outside of the normal. So right now we have the 65 DNL, or the day-night sound level noise sensors, and that gives a noise footprint around the airport. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have divergent paths, north and south flow, departures, to mitigate all the sound that's going on in our communities, both in the north and south departure routes. So what we're trying to do is not just adhere to what the 150, but what we can do what's best for the communities, for the churches, senior homes, schools, and try to mitigate the risks and what's best for our communities. So what we've done is we've created some websites as well, so I have some flyers, and we have a 175-page Part 150 with all the data that's going to be coming out next summer. So hopefully with that, we can work as a community and do what's best for the airport, for the businesses, and the residences around. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. If you would give the pamphlet, if Ms. right across the seat, and the officer, to the officer, then he'll give it to our city clerk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Gross?
Okay, I got you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilman and Mr. Jones, City Manager. My name is Ann Gross. I am a volunteer president and founder of Friends of Feral Felines, which is an all-volunteer nonprofit group here in Charlotte. Our goal is to reduce the outdoor cat population of stray cats and feral cats who are afraid of people. Our program that we follow is a trap, neuter, and return program. They are all vaccinated for rabies and distemper, and this impacts our city. It reduces the number of these outdoor community cats that are found in the airport, behind our churches, in people's backyards, behind restaurants. UNCC Charlotte, we have worked there. And just this year, we have spayed and neutered and vaccinated 1,406 cats. The impact of that is the prevention of kittens, and we have, with our program, prevented 5,046 kittens from being born outside in our community. We have a viable program. We are celebrating our 25th year here in Charlotte. We started in 1998 with 3 volunteers. We now have 39 volunteers. Two of our newer members are actually physicians, and we have many professionals in our group. Any citizen in our city can call us, and we advise them, we teach them about trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return of these animals, and we implement low-cost clinics.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gross. We hear the good deeds that you're doing. Our next two speakers are Jennifer Dacia and Nicole Shufflin. All right, if you would say your name for the record, we'll go ahead and begin with you.
Sure. Good evening, members of Charlotte City Council. My name is Jennifer Diesa, and I've been a resident of Mecklenburg County for 24 years. I serve as a volunteer at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Animal Care and Control Shelter on Byram Drive. Thank you for your time and attention this evening. Before I start, I'd like to share a quote from Gandhi. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. I stand before you tonight to address a pressing issue that requires immediate attention, the dire state of our city's animal shelter. As a concerned citizen, volunteer, and an animal advocate, I urge you to consider providing the necessary financial support and resources to address the outdated and overcrowded conditions at the shelter. It is crucial to acknowledge that our animal shelter plays a vital role in our community. It serves as a safe haven for countless abandoned, neglected, and abused animals, as well as providing resources like low-cost vaccinations, spay-neuter services to underserved community members. The shelter is outdated, it lacks basic amenities, and unable to accommodate the growing number of animals in need. The shelter has not added any capacity in 30 years, even though the city of Charlotte has doubled in population. The overcrowding issue is particularly alarming. The shelter is bursting at the seams with animals crammed into small, inadequate spaces and a stressful maze of hallways to get the animals in and out of the shelter for exercise and a mental break. This not only compromises their well-being, but also poses a significant risk to staff and volunteer safety. Also, overcrowding leads to diseases and heightened aggression among the animals. Financial support would enable the shelter to hire more qualified staff members. The current staff is overwhelmed and stretched thin due to the increasing number of animals. Last week, we had to let go of one remaining paid dog walker and lack the staff needed to clean the kennels in a timely manner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Nicole Shoflin.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Nicole Shoflin, and I'm here to represent Friends of Feral Felines. With the continued help and support of Friends and Feral Felines over the last 25 years, I have been working with Charlotte residents out in the field using the trap neuter vaccine return method to stabilize community cat populations. I have never seen so many cats in Charlotte as I do right now. They are everywhere. Over the last year, 3 of my neighbors and myself spent our own money trapping, spaying, and neutering and vaccinating over 60 cats near my home in East Charlotte. Nearly 50 of those cats were female and capable of giving birth to 3 litters of kittens a year. Our hard work and determination prevented the birth of hundreds of unwanted kittens that would have been dumped into our communities and an overcrowded animal care and control facility. But this was only a tiny section of Charlotte, stretching across only a few city blocks. Cats are reproducing exponentially everywhere in Charlotte. I am constantly being bombarded with texts, Facebook posts, phone calls from people who need help with the community cat population. It's exhausting. At a time when getting TNR appointments should be easy, it's difficult. There is such a high demand for community cat spay-neuter appointments that Stand for Animals had to start an appointment lottery. There are sometimes over 1,000 applicants for these lotteries, but only a few lucky winners. Other low-cost spay-neuter clinics have a 4 to 6 waiting period for one TNR, that's a spay-neuter appointment for free-roaming cats. Friends of Feral Felines desperately needs funding for a low-cost, high-volume spay-neuter clinic, a clinic that can handle 25 to 40 cats at a time, and we need them now. Charlotte's cat crisis isn't going away. Without action, it's just going to get worse. Every day throughout the city of Charlotte, dedicated caretakers.
Thank you very much for your comments. Our next speaker is Khalid Blakta and Dina Fayed.
Good evening.
Would you please, whichever would like to speak first, would you just say your name for the record?
Good evening. My name is Khalid, and I would like to point out 2 minutes will leave me with 8 seconds per family member lost. I'll do my best. My name is Khalid, and I'm a proud resident of Charlotte. As an American, I grew up in a safe and supportive home. I graduated in aerospace engineering, and I see you wearing NASA, so maybe we'll talk later. From Ohio State, go Buckeyes. I currently work in the technology industry, and I'm grateful for living in such a beautiful city. I actually moved my mom from Gaza Strip. It provides me with safety and access to the cultural and recreational opportunities that I crave. I must say, as a Palestinian from Gaza, when I remember my hometown, Sheikh Ridwan, I cannot believe or imagine it as the graveyard for children as the UN describes it today. I only remember the fun summers of my youth spent visiting my family home, building handmade kites with my cousins Salah and Khalid, flying them at the beach where my cousin Duat would make sandcastles. I smile when I remember my uncle Hassan when I would eat kanafa and drink chai with him, or my uncle Wissam, who is a doctor and a national team coach for volleyball. I remember the nickname that I gave my uncle Ayman, Forkbeard, because he would kiss me and I would feel the thorns on my face from his beard. The realization that these moments are now gone because every single person I mentioned to you has not made it out of this war. America continues to be the only state to veto a ceasefire. Every day I'm reminded that I do not matter by the leaders in this country. Just this morning, I got news of the murder of 3 additional family members. One of them, a father to a 1-week-old baby. My surviving grandmothers and uncles and aunts right now live a life stripped of safety, shelter, water, electricity, food, basic human rights, all while grieving and battling mental anguish. I know the bell's gonna ring.
Thank you very much.
We are not data points.
We'll have to go to the next speaker, so.
I'm happy to give some of my time.
No, it doesn't work like that. We have a process that we have, so it's not a time.
We are not data points. Guys. We are not data points. And I'm talking on Deanna's behalf. The biased media outlets consume us for content.
She has to do the speaking now. You have 2 minutes as well.
His family were all civilians, each with life goals, loved ones, and unlived stories. The last time he spoke with his cousin Salah, he had sent him a photo of his dinner spread and told him not to worry about him or anyone else and to visit next summer. His twin brother Khalid was excited to leave Gaza and be with his fiancée in Europe. Born together, Salah and Khalid lived mirrored lives, not only sharing birth moments, classrooms, hobbies, and friends, but also a tragic murder. He cannot bear looking at gruesome images from the scene. Khalid was wearing the shirt that he just gifted him in September. He shares a name with Khalid, and it strikes us all. It could have been him. In fact, many of us in this room are descendants of the Nakba survivors, just like Khalid and I, each of us a legitimate target for the immoral and terrorist Israeli occupation forces. This bloodshed did not start on October 7th. In 1948, his grandfather Musa fled Israeli massacres in his hometown of El Brir towards the now Gaza concentration camp. He was 12 years old and had witnessed the murder of his parents, siblings, and uncles. As Americans, we get to stand up before you today, privileged to be alive and compelled to tell their stories, to stand up for the over 20,000 humans killed in Gaza. Today, I'm a voice for the voiceless family and for Khalid's voiceless family members who were killed for merely being born Palestinian. We are here to show you Palestinian humanity, and stories matter. We urge the Council to take a moral stand against the genocide of Gaza and to listen to the demands of its constituents. I plead with you to call for an end of the killing of the bloodshed, to call for a ceasefire now, and to stop North Carolina military aid to Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rest in power to my family. Rest in power to Hassan, healthcare manager, Bilal, press house media, Ayman, public health media, Dr. Wissam, national volleyball team, Dua, resident nurse, Salah, online entrepreneur, Khalid, online entrepreneur, Saleh, high school.
have to leave the this meeting right now.
You won't even give us your attention! You won't even give us your...
allowing me a moment. I want to say thank you for allowing me a moment to understand that we are in a public space and we all want to be heard. So with that, we're going to continue on our speakers list. And our next speaker is Sue Worrell and Noah Goldman.
Oh, boy. Here you go.
So this is what, they're not allowed to have the signs coming over, but they are seated where they can have a sign, Ms. Worrell. If you would voluntarily do that, I think that we would all appreciate it.
Apparently not.
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Mike's off. Is the mic on?
Is the mic on yet? Yeah, good. All right, there we go.
Reset the time? Thank you.
We'll reset
Good
the
evening.
time.
My name is Sue Worrell, and I am the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Charlotte. I am proud to have called Charlotte my home for over 20 years. At the November 27th Charlotte City Council meeting, multiple speakers spoke in angry and hostile tones regarding the events transpiring between Israel and Hamas.
Genocide!
They called upon the Charlotte City Council to adopt a resolution, all while chanting threats for the annihilation of the State of Israel and all her people. I'm here tonight because last month and tonight, in this very chamber, our community was subjected to virulent anti-Semitism, disinformation, and hatred shouted and chanted at and about Jews, Zionists, and Israelis. Platforming hate speech, such as we witnessed at the November 27th City Council meeting, simply cannot be left unchallenged, as it is a sad reflection of the divisions festering in our city. When anti-Semitism and the dehumanization of Jews is left unchecked, it tears at the fabric of our society right here at home. I've had the privilege of advocating for the Charlotte Jewish community for more than 18 years, during which time the Charlotte has always been a community in which Jews are respected and valued, where we have felt the safety and confidence to live our lives freely and proudly as Jews. Sadly, in recent months, since the attacks on Israel by the terrorist organization Hamas, that sense of belonging and security has begun to wane. The rapidly escalating levels of anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and demonization of Israel, and those who support the existence of a Jewish state, have resulted in Jews no longer feeling safe in our own community here in Charlotte. We are currently celebrating the 8-day festival of Hanukkah, a holiday that celebrates resilience and light in the midst of darkness. And yet, in the weeks leading up to the holiday, the biggest topic of conversation among the Jewish Moms Facebook group was, is it safe for us to put our menorahs in the windows this year? As City Council members, you have committed yourself to the welfare and well-being of the citizens of this city. You rightly pride yourselves on creating and sustaining the welcome, diverse, and inclusive community that Charlotte has become known for.
Thank you, Ms. Worrell. Mr. Goldman?
Over 20,000 Palestinians have died. Genocide is not peace.
All right. Again,
They do it, they keep us now.
we want to be able to listen to everyone, and we have listened very carefully to you. Please respect that. If there is not,
Politics gets us nowhere.
All right.
There are no two sides in genocide. There's no neutrality in apartheid and occupation.
We don't have to let, sorry. All right, Mr. Goldman.
Hold on.
You can go.
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead. I need to ask you to leave the chamber.
Now.
Now. I beg your pardon?
She's not going anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I understand. So with that, this meeting is recessed. We will empty the chamber. After Mr. Goldman speaks, Mr. Goldman will be allowed to speak. All right?
One thing. I have a resolution, fellow members. We are in pain, we are hurt. Please comply and listen. We have speakers who are going to say very important things. Please cooperate. We have worked very hard. They're giving us a platform to speak. Please act properly so we can move on.
Hey, not for them, but for us, please.
Okay. Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman.
Hold on.
You don't get to stay.
Yes, please.
Oh, she has to go. She has to go. Yeah.
They do have to go. I'm sorry, you really do have to leave the chamber.
Under what grounds?
Ed.
Let's just go.
Because of your
Let's recess. You're gonna have your own people turn against you.
For the people on the feet, not for them.
something, please.
We can recess.
Everybody has to empty the chamber.
Exactly.
All right. Mr. Goldman, I am really apologizing that you're not going to have a chance to speak. But in this case, we are going to recess our meeting and empty the chamber. Thank you. We will give you time. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We are not going to have, we are going to, this is it. No, we tried. we're going to go ahead and do the agenda items that we have on our agenda.
Yeah, I got you.
And then we'll stay for a closed session.
Okay.
Okay?
So we're done with the public forum?
We're done with the public hearing.
Okay.
I mean, the public forum, yes.
Okay.
All right. And I'm just waiting long enough to get a video and of the sign language folks. Are they going to be?
Can't do a resolution. Did you stress that?
What?
That we can't do resolution for this?
I'm going to send a letter because I think that it's better if we try. Okay, ready? Mr. Jones, you're good? Let channel,
She does.
let the NBC network come on. You guys, you okay?
Trying to find a spot.
Find a spot, okay. All right, so thank you, everyone. It's, you never know what you're going to have to do one day at a time, as they say. So we're going to begin with our public hearings. We're now going to open the public hearing on closing a portion of the public right-of-way adjacent to Hyde Drive. We do not have any speakers signed up to speak. Do I have a motion?
Motion to close.
Close and adopt a resolution.
Motion to close and adopt.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. The next item is item 8, which is a public hearing and a resolution to close unopened right-of-way off Reston Road. We do not have any speakers. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing and to adopt the resolution to close the unopened right-of-way?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. If anyone's in opposition, there's no one in opposition. The next item is, our next item is the city manager's report.
No report.
No report. The next item is business to accept state and federal funding for the Sugar Creek Corridors of Opportunity. This is a 3-step process. Adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute the municipal agreement with NCDOT for $2,425,000 for the Sugar Creek Corridors project. Adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute the municipal agreement with the Federal Highway Administration to accept Rebuilding America Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant funds in the amount of $12 million, and then adopt a budget ordinance appropriating the total. Do we have a motion?
Move to adopt A, B, and C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Is there anyone in opposition? I see no opposition. The next one is item 11. Is there a motion to accept a sponsorship in the amount of $160,000 from Lowe's for Corridors of Opportunity program and adopt an ordinance appropriating to the general capital funds?
So moved.
Same amount. We have a motion already and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The next item is 12. Do I have a motion to adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $169,997.14 from North Carolina 911 Board to the Emergency Telephone System Fund? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The next item is 13, to adopt a resolution authorizing the donation of 2 surplus Charlotte area transit system vans to Roof Above. And do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Our next item is for the calendar schedule, and is there a motion to approve?
Second.
And you saw the amended one that was changed to, I think the clerk passed it out, passed it out, got it.
Yeah.
Passed out a new one that showed on the first Mondays, council committee meetings will be held and discussions will continue. And I want to thank Dante and Tark for continuing to figure out how we can make the best use of that time after we have our committee meetings. So with that, do we have a motion to approve the council calendar?
So
please?
moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you all. So now, I think that puts us into our closed session. Is there any other items before coming in? You didn't get a chance to say thank you
67.
to Joni. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to,
Okay.
okay.
Mayor, thank you. Briefly, just in celebration of the third African-American female to ever go in space 17 years ago. She spent 12 days at the space station, so I just want to recognize her efforts to NASA, and unfortunately, she's married to me. But I just want to celebrate Joan Higginbotham. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, tell her I'm her whisperer now, okay? All right. So now, Mr. Baker, will you please read a motion to go into a closed session?
Yes, I have a motion with three subparts. Need a motion to go into closed session to consult with the city attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to 143-318-1183, to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in Charlotte, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the city of Charlotte pursuant to NCGS 143-318-1184, and finally, to view a law enforcement reporting pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A.
So moved. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, so we will start.